Hi guys, it's Marc Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Marc Zicree of Space Command, and I am back from the World Science Fiction Convention, which was a great time, wonderful time. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the time I had and what I did, and also talk about science fiction conventions, because I don't think we've done a Mr. Sci-Fi talking about that, and it's one of the wonderful things about our community. And if you've never been to a science fiction convention, you've really missed out on something quite wonderful that's part of science fiction and fantasy and horror. And also, there are two kinds of conventions, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because there are conventions that are run as businesses, and there are conventions that are put on by the fans, and they're very, very different animals. And there's also conventions that focus on media, science fiction TV and movies primarily, and comic books, etc., like San Diego Comic-Con, which are big monsters, 150,000 attendees. And then there's science fiction conventions like the World Science Fiction Convention and the World Fantasy Convention that focus specifically on books. And they're very intimate affairs. For instance, the World Science Fiction Convention had about 4,000 attendees, and it's really a gathering of the family of those of us who read books and write books and edit books and publish books and all of that. So let me just kind of give you a little overview, and I'll talk about the experience I had over the last few days in Kansas City, Missouri. And it was great fun, great fun. So first I think I'll talk about the time I had. So the World Science Fiction Convention has been held since 1939. My friend Ray Bradbury went to the first one. Forrest Ackerman loaned him $100, and he was able to take the bus to New York City, but he didn't have the dollar that would have allowed him to actually participate in the World Science Fiction Convention banquet. But it was the first gathering of the science fiction writers and fans and editors and so forth all together, because back then in 1939 they read magazines like Amazing Stories, and they wrote voluminous letters to each other, and they published fanzines, which were non-professional magazines that they would type up themselves and run on Mimeo machines, these old style machines that you would crank by hand. And Ray Bradbury at that time was a teenager. He was 19. He was publishing a fanzine of his own called Futuria Fantasia, and he was friends with Forrest Ackerman, who was to become the editor of Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, and who was a book agent and a writer. And there was the West Coast contingent and the East Coast contingent, and the World Science Fiction Convention allowed them in New York City to get together for the first time and meet. And Forrest Ackerman wore a costume. He dressed as the man from the future, assuming everyone would come in costume. And of course, he was the only one in costume. So after that, he founded the Masquerade that has been a mainstay of many science fiction conventions since. And Ray also told me another very touching story, that they went to the 1939 New York World's Fair, and he remembered at night watching the fireworks going off, and tears were streaming down his face, because he thought to himself, there's a war coming, and I'll be drafted into that war, and I'll be killed, and no one will ever know I existed. And he felt just such despair and such grief. And interestingly enough, he was 4F, so he wasn't drafted. I think it was because of his vision, and he of course became Ray Bradbury. But it was such a poignant moment, and for again for him to meet his peers, and he was only a few years away from becoming a great writer, and he was writing every single day even then. So, but so since then, every year the World Science Fiction Convention has gotten together, except for World War II. And they're in different cities, usually in the United States, but not always. For instance, next year it'll be in Finland. And when the World Science Fiction Convention is in a different country, there's a convention held in the continental United States during the same time for those who can't make it out of country. But Finland sure looks like it'll be a lot of fun. So, but each year they hold these conventions. They nominate and then vote on the Hugo Awards, and it's the top award in science fiction. The Nebulas are the other top award given by the Science Fiction Writers of America, and this Hugo Award is a rocket ship. I was nominated for it in 2008 for World Enough in Time, the George Takei Star Trek episode. I was also nominated for the Nebula for that, and I remember seeing the Hugo and the Nebula Awards on the mantle of Theodore Sturgeon, who was a terrific science fiction writer who wrote for Star Trek and wrote great books and short stories, and he was my mentor when I was a teenager. And I remember saying, oh God, I'd love to have one of those awards. I found out at this Hugo Award that the Hugo is a big rocket, and it was supposedly modeled after the Oldsmobile ornament, hood ornament, though generally the Hugo was sculpted from scratch. But in 1956, it actually was an Oldsmobile ornament where they took off the side wings and it was just the rocket. And Robert Silverberg was given one of those when he was 21 years old. He's a very famous science fiction writer, and he talked at this Hugo Awards about getting that 1956 Hugo, and that he loved it. That he didn't mind the fact that it was a hood ornament off of a car. It was a wonderful honor to him at that point, and he thought it was terrific, and so do I. So every year, all the science fiction writers and fans and artists and editors and publishers get together at Worldcon, and it's really like a family. It's really very friendly, very everyone has their own little differences of opinion, but it's basically a community, and it's very different from Hollywood, which is much more dog eat dog and much more arrogant and egotistical and so forth. It's really it's just terrific. I mean, people they're oriented toward books. They love books. They love the genre, and they get together and they talk, and it's really like a family reunion each time. Now, there has been a controversy the last couple of years because there was a group of dissident science fiction fans and writers called the Sad Puppies, and also I think the Rabid Puppies, and they stacked the deck and they got a number of their items nominated, and they're sort of white men, racist, homophobic, etc. And it's been a big controversy, but the larger contingent of writers and fans and publishers and editors have fought back, and a lot of science fiction, because basically, and it's always the question in society and in art, which is, do you want art to represent a narrow view of things, or do you want it to represent the world as it is? And with all of the different races, cultures, sexual orientations, etc. Now, I've always favored the latter. I think art allows us to go places in our minds that are not safe for us to go, or we wouldn't perceive it to be safe for us to go in reality. So it does us a great service because it allows us to look through the eyes of others and see that they're the same as us. So that's how you get changes in the world. The fact that we now have gay marriage, the fact that we now have a black president, this is because art allowed us, television shows, movies, books, allowed us to see through the eyes of others and understand the universality of humanity. And I think it's a great thing, and I think it's a great service. So I was very thrilled that, this, in a way, this controversy has opened the doors and allowed a very spirited conversation, and many women, many people of color were winners this year of the Hugo, and I thought that was absolutely terrific. So controversy can often stir things up for the better, and I think in this case it's doing that. So I was there. I was at the Hugo Awards, 4,000 people in the audience, and the guest of honor was a writer named Pat Cadigan, who lives in London, and I've met her before. We know each other, and we got to really spend some time this time out and sit and talk about the family of science fiction and how great it is to all be together. And she's been battling cancer, but she's doing a great job of it. And to meet her, you wouldn't know she had cancer, but in the Hugo program book, it mentioned it. So she's being very public about it and very feisty, which again is terrific. And everyone is being very supportive. And again, there's the sense of, and I've had this sense since I was a kid, when I first saw Star Trek, and it was a family on the Enterprise, and they were from all walks of life and all races. There was the family of everyone is invited, and everyone can be part of this, and science fiction has become ever more inclusive. When I was a kid, most of the science fiction writers were men, and the few that were women were writing under men's names or names that could seem like men. Andre Norton was a woman writer, Lee Brackett, etc. So there were very few female writers. There were very good female writers, but as I moved into the 70s, we started to get overtly female writers, Ursula K. Le Guin, Joanna Russ, and the genre started to open up, which was terrific. And in my previous Mr. Sci-Fi commentary, I talked about Harlan Ellison, how he kicked open the doors of what was acceptable as a science fiction story, that it could be writing about much broader subject matter. And so now we have that much more across the board, again, which I applaud and favor. So one of the fun things about going to Worldcon also was that I got to meet writers I hadn't met before. So I was reuniting with people like Joe Haldeman, who had been one of my teachers at Clarion, but also seeing people that I didn't know and getting to know writers that I didn't know. So it was great fun. So, and I was on panels. So, for instance, one of the panels I was on torture, and I was very worried before that there might be someone who was in favor of torture on the panel, and then that it would be this free for all. But fortunately, everyone on the panel agreed that the torture was horrific and we shouldn't do it, and the audience was packed. And and I spoke about the moral consequence of torture and the fact that it isn't even whether it works or not. It's the fact that you're creating monsters by torturing people, and that it makes the world worse. That it creates a more nightmarish world because of what you're doing. That there isn't a moral equivalency. You can't say, well, because they're doing it, that allows us to do it. At the Nuremberg trials, the Nazis' defense attorneys tried to introduce as a defense that the American side had done atrocities too, and the judge ruled that threw that out, saying just because one side does atrocities does not in any way justify the atrocities of the other side, and I strongly believe this. So it was funny because throughout the rest of the convention, people were coming up to me and saying, I really enjoyed the torture panel. I know this sounds funny, but I really enjoyed it, because they really liked what we had to say, and they were very complimentary. I was also on a panel about writing for TV and film, and Michael Cassett and Melinda Snodgrass, with whom I'd worked before, were on that panel too. I worked with Michael on The New Twilight Zone and with Melinda on Star Trek: The Next Generation. And again, and Melinda's on Wild Cards, which is, she's been writing those series of books with George R.R. Martin, and they're going to be doing a series now, and she's executive producer, and it was just wonderful to see her, and I applaud the fact that it's going to be a show, and I applaud the fact that they've hired her. Again, you know, the good guys winning, and the talented people getting hired to do a good job. I'm sure it'll be a great show. And again, it was very fun because we were talking to a packed audience and telling the real deal, because I was able to talk about Space Command and the fact that I was able to raise $700,000 directly from my audience and make my show, and the new model that I love so much, and the fact that there are 417 scripted comedy and drama series on all these different networks and platforms, which allows a huge amount of content and a lot of different kinds of shows and different viewpoints. So, and then I was on a comic book panel talking about superheroes, and the people on the panel with me, again, were very knowledgeable. There were every now and then you're on a panel and there's a guy who's a complete idiot, and he's spouting all this nonsense, and you're just trying to be diplomatic and not call him an idiot, but kind of correct what he's saying because it's, nonsense. But I didn't have that experience this time. Everyone on the panels I was on were experts and knowledgeable and gracious and no weirdos. And so I was on the superhero panel, and we were talking about the glut of superhero movies. And one of the people on the panel was an academic, and he'd been, he knew a lot about comics, and another guy wrote for comics, and so it was a very, very fun panel. And then I did a presentation on Space Command, and that got a great response. And in the meantime, I was just having lunches and dinners and breakfasts and meetings and just hanging out with science fiction writers and directors, writers and publishers and editors, because this is book oriented. And then after the Hugo Awards, George R.R. Martin, the creator of Game of Thrones, threw a Hugo Losers party that he invited me to. And I'd worked with George on Beauty and the Beast and The New Twilight Zone. And so again, we know each other. We're all part of the same community. And I was very gratified he invited me. And it's great because now he's got money. And so he rented out this huge theater. He's using his money very, very well. And he rented out this gorgeous turn-of-the-century theater. And it was beautifully outfitted, and again, it was the all of the famous names of science fiction: David Brin and Connie Willis, great people. and George did something very clever because of this controversy with the sad puppies / rabbit puppies. People who would have been nominated for Hugos didn't get nominated. So what George did was he found rocket-shaped hood ornaments from various cars, made them into awards. He called them the Alfie Awards after famed science fiction writer Alfred Bester, and he awarded them to those who would have been nominated, except for this controversy. And so he announced those winners one at a time, and they came up. It included the writers of Locus, which is the science fiction trade journal, which is a wonderful publication, and all of these winners came up, and they were just thrilled and surprised, and it was a great moment. It was a great continuation of the spirit of the Hugo Awards, and they were clutching their rocket-shaped awards, and it was very, very dear. They also award what are called the Retro Hugos, which are Hugos for years prior to when the Hugo Awards were nominated. So Ray Bradbury won one of those this year, and a number of other famous science fiction writers. They were awarding it for 1941 this year, and so many of the great classic writers of science fiction were winning. So, and again, George Martin's party was quite. It was just a really friendly event, and the entire convention was very friendly. I got to meet Amy Sturgis. I got to have breakfast with her. She's a science fiction academic and nonfiction writer primarily, and I'd heard her on Starship Sofa, which is a wonderful science fiction podcast that I contribute to at times, and she would do essays about science fiction history, and I'd heard her voice for several years, but when I found out she was at the convention, I reached out to her, and we got together and had a lovely time. And it was just, and I was just reconnecting with people that I really like and hanging out with people that are just delightful. Connie Willis is another great person. If you've never heard her or read her, I urge you to. And then beyond that, I was pitching new projects because, again, it is a professional gathering. And so I've written a new screenplay called Fugitive Space that is a big science fiction action film. If you liked Aliens, you'll love this. And my agent at CAA, John Levin, has been submitting it. And hopefully it'll be a big tentpole movie. But I had also just laid out what the trilogy of films would be. And while I was thinking about that, I thought, well, I could write this as a trilogy of novels. So I reached out to some book editors I know and book writers and got their advice about how best to pitch it and who to talk to. Kevin J. Anderson is another friend, and he's written 140 books and sold millions of copies. And so he and his wife, Rebecca Mostra, were kind enough to grab a bite with me and advise. And I was advising them about Hollywood. And so basically I ended up pitching Fugitive Space as a trilogy of novels, and every editor I sat down with wanted to read the script and was very eager to, and so I'm sending it off now to many major publishing houses. We'll see if I get a book deal, but that's exactly what happened with Magic Time. It started as a 2-hour script and ended up as 3 novels. So, and it's also fun because, a number of the writers that I'm friends with, the novelists, they want to understand how Hollywood works. It was really cool because at one point, after we did our writing for Hollywood, writing for television panel, I was having dinner, and the friend I was having dinner with, headed off, and I was still sitting there, and someone came up and said, "Can I just ask you a question or two? I heard you on that panel," and I said, "Sure, you bet, absolutely," and it turned out that he had written a novel. He was in his 40s, I think, and he decided to write a novel while he was still, able to. And he wrote a novel, and he pitched it to an editor who we ran into at a party. And anyway, it ended up as a big book sale, and it had just sold to a network / studio to be developed as a series. And he didn't understand how Hollywood worked. He didn't know what the what the deal was. And I basically said, I invited him to sit with me, and we talked for about an hour. And I told him the ins and outs of Hollywood, and because what was a total mystery to him was obvious to me. And the signs are very good. They've attached a showrunner, a script is being written, it's going very, very well. But he didn't know that because he didn't understand how we work out here in Hollywood. So then I was allowed a guest to George Martin's party. So I took him. I took him as my +1, and he just loved it. I was introducing him to all the folks I know, and it was Cinderella at the ball, which was great. I love that because it's. Yeah, because I also remember when I first started coming to conventions and how I had stars in my eyes, which I still do. Again, they talk about science fiction as a sense of wonder, and this is something I still carry with me in everything I do, whether it's writing a novel or shooting Space Command or going to the World Science Fiction Convention. Just think of the sound of that, the World Science Fiction Convention, and meeting all the people whose work I love, and these people with such dear hearts and such good friends. So anyway, so that's it for now, just telling you a little bit about the science fiction conventions in this world. We'll talk about it more next time, but I thought you'd enjoy hearing all about it. So it's Marc Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi. Subscribe, go onto my YouTube channel, Mr. Sci-Fi, if you found this through some other way, and you can subscribe to the Mr. Sci-Fi channel and watch a lot of videos about the inside workings of science fiction. So until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.